So today at our meeting, we're really looking forward to learning about our recent legislative session. I know there was a lot of stuff going on, and one thing that was a real hot topic I know was health care. And so at this point, I'd just like to mention that the Manatee Chamber has taken a position in favor of the half-cent sales tax increase and the E-date tax abatement referendums that are going to be on the June 18th ballot. So I would ask that you please educate yourself and educate yourself on these issues, mention it to your employees, and then get out and vote. So we have information on both of these referendums at the registration table, so please pick some up on your way out. And now we'll have Representative Jim Boyd come to the podium and introduce Speaker Weatherford. Thank you, Jim. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Tom, and Bob and Neil. Thank you for this privilege and honor to introduce our speaker, Will Weatherford. And friends, normally I would just do this kind of ad lib from what I know, but there is so much I want you to know about our speaker before he comes up. I will be brief, but I do want to give you a little background on the man, Will Weatherford. Will is a small business owner, husband, and father who resides in Wesley Chapel. Will grew up in Tampa as the second oldest in a family of 9 children. That's right, 9 children. He was homeschooled and, like his 6 brothers, played football at Land O'Lakes. He went on and continued his education at Jacksonville University, and I understand was a heck of a linebacker at Jacksonville U. Actually, he was so good, a little surprised you didn't come to Florida State like your brother Drew, who we know and love. But he served there on student government and was elected association vice president and received the Outstanding Leadership Award. After college, Will worked in commercial real estate when Speaker of the House Alan Bentz recruited him to serve in state government. Working with Speaker Bentz, Will learned valuable lessons about servant leadership, integrity, and fairness. And I remember going up to Tallahassee with our chamber group, with Neil and the commandos, when Speaker Weatherford was in Speaker Bentz's office. And I remember back then what a bright and outgoing and just great young man he was then, and obviously has grown quite a bit since then in his terms of leadership. At that time, however, Will had no idea how important those days would be. In 2006, Will ran for the Florida House to represent Pasco County. He won his first race and returned to Tallahassee, this time representing his hometown as an elected official. Not a typical freshman, Will was able to use his knowledge of policy and process to immediately tackle important issues. He has a record of championing education reform, promoting transparency and accountability in government, expanding school choice for Florida's parents and children, and leading a redistricting process that put the process above politics and was upheld by unanimous vote of the Florida Supreme Court, I think, as you all know. Will's inclusive style of leadership earned him the confidence of his peers, and they unanimously elected him Speaker of the House in 2012. Today, Will is the youngest Speaker in America. Over the years, Will has been recognized as a champion of business, a defender of parents' rights by the Florida Catholic Conference, Legislator of the Year by Able Trust for Disabled, a top 12 state legislator to watch by Governing Magazine. He is truly a citizen legislator. He owns a small business and serves on the board of directors for Florida Traditions Bank, based in Dade City. He's also involved in many charitable organizations, such as Jobs for America's Graduates, Florida's Take Stock in Children, where he serves as a mentor. Just as family was a great influence in his beginning of life, Will also continues to impact the local community and the state with his commitment to family. He's married to Courtney. They reside in Wesley Chapel, as I said, and they have 3 daughters, Ella Kate, Molly, and Madeline. And all that said, on behalf of Chairman Holder, Representative Stubbe, and I can tell you there is not a greater honor than to serve under Will Weatherford. He is a man of principle, a man of character. He is a visionary. He's a leader. I want to be on his team wherever he goes, whatever he does. And I promise you, folks, you will see Will Weatherford in the national spotlight before it's all over. He won't tell you that, but we'll tell you that. With that, we won't tell her that. But with that, please help me welcome our friend, Speaker Will Weatherford.
Thank you, Jim. That was very, very kind. And please do not tell my wife that you said that. I'll be in big trouble. I'm just now getting back to normal. I was just joking around at the table. I played golf for the first time in 7 months this week, and it was a pretty humbling and embarrassing experience, but enjoyed a little bit of life as normal. I got to tell you, I'm so honored to be here. And Jim, thank you very much for your kind words. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did this session. I know a lot of it has to do with what we didn't do. Seems to be a hot topic in the press, and I'm going to talk about that as well. But let me just first say, I called Jim Boyd probably 7 or 8 months ago, and I said, hey, look, I know you're in the insurance business, you understand insurance issues, you understand economic development, and that was an area of policy he felt passionately about and wanted to be involved in. And I said, I may have another idea for you if you're willing to do it. And I said, one of my priorities this year is to completely reform our elections process because it's been an embarrassment to our country and to our state. I want to reform the ethics process that we have in this state because we have not done ethics reform and raised the bar for public officials in Florida for 30 years. It had been avoided. And I wanted to do campaign finance reform. And I needed somebody who was willing to take the heat on all 3 of those issues at a one committee. And I asked him if he was up for the job. And I don't think he was very excited about it in the beginning. And I promised him that, it would be a furious start, but that it would probably cool off towards the end of session and he could take some time off. That didn't work out either, so I lied about that. But he did it with such honor and such grace. And Jim, I'm forever indebted to you for what he did this year was transformational. It'll change the way elections and campaigns and the ethical code of our public officials go on forever. And it's because of Jim Boyd. So congratulations for that, Jim. I'm also very pleased to be here with some other good friends, and I see my friend Doug Holder here, who came in with me in 2006 when we got elected, and Doug is chairman of a very important committee. Actually, it's a full committee that has 3 subcommittees under it: insurance and energy and business regulation. He's been a key part of my leadership team and a great friend. And Greg Stubbe has been a wonderful leader in the legislature as well, and championed some really, really tough issues this year. One that we didn't get across the goal line, but we were just talking about that and the protection of our school system and our kids. And he comes from great stock. I know the sheriff well, and they have a wonderful family and a great history of public service here, Sheriff, so it's good to see you as well. And, of course, the ever-entertaining Mike Bennett, who is here. And, I thought we had finally gotten him out of public service, but apparently he's back. And, when he left Tallahassee, I thought it would be a while. His condo is right next to mine, so when I would come lurking home, after a long day at the Capitol, I'd hear him yelling for me at the porch. And my 5-year-old daughter, who's 5 now at the time, was probably 3 or 4. She thought he was her grandfather. I mean, she just loves Mike Bennett. And so it's great to see you. And he was very instrumental on the elections reform as well and helping guide us to make sure that we got it done right. So thanks for your leadership there. As I was saying, I'm trying to get back to normal a little bit. And we get up in Tallahassee. You're in this little bubble, and everybody's telling you, what a great idea that is. And hey, Mr. Speaker, how you doing? And man, that's a funny joke and great looking tie. And then you come home, and you have to adjust to normal life. You have a wife who's mad at you because you've been gone for 2 months. You have kids who haven't seen you. You have a business that you've been neglecting. And so you try to get back to normal life. And right now we're trying to potty train our 2-year-old. And so it's been a real bear. My 5-year-old was no problem. It was just quick and easy. And I've got a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 7-month-old. And my 2-year-old, we've got her running around the house, in underwear, trying to, every 15 minutes, you need to go potty, you need to go. And the other day, this is the savviness of my 26-month-old. She comes up to me, she says, Daddy, Chanel, which is the name of my wife's dog. I married into this dog. She's a great dog, but she's ours now. But her name is Chanel. And she says, Daddy, Chanel had an accident. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. What happened? So she walks me around the corner, and there's been an accident on the ground. Not the number 1, okay, but a bigger accident. And I really quickly realized that it wasn't Chanel who had the accident. And I thought to myself, first of all, it's one thing to, it's potty training. I get it. Mistakes happen. But my 2-year-old had the savvy to come to me, seek me out, and blame it on the dog. And I thought to myself, I told my wife, she was gone at the time, and I came back and I told the story, and she looked at me and she said, she's going to make a great congressman one day. Congresswoman. So just kidding. We love all of our public officials. But anyway, that's a true story and the fun things we get to do when we come back home. Let me first start out by saying I think Florida's on an amazing hot streak. And the chambers of commerce, you feel it. Right, Bob? That the membership level, when things are happening, you feel it probably quicker than most. There's some really exciting things happening in the state of Florida. I could tell you, you read the same newspapers I do. Unemployment continues to go down. It's at 7.5%. It's probably going to be 7% in the near future. I think at this time next year, it'll be 6%. Things are trending really, really well. We've created 300,000 jobs just in the last 2 years, which is almost unprecedented. There is probably the most exciting number that I've heard to date is, and to give you a little history, at our high water mark at 2006, 2007, when we were really growing, we had about 1,250 people moving to Florida a day. And that was unprecedented. I mean, everybody said it was unsustainable, and it was. And we found that out in about 2007, 2008. But I remember giving speeches, and I even went back and looked at some of my old speeches I used to give to chambers and my Rotary Club, and I would say, you know, the times where 1,000 people move to Florida a day are over. We're not going to see those, for another generation. It's going to be 20 years before 1,000 people a day are moving back to Florida. So guess how many people are moving to Florida every single day now? 1,000 people. Moody's is projecting 360,000 people will move to the state of Florida this year. Amazing. Unanticipated. You could not have predicted it. There's probably some real estate folks in this room. There is something happening. Now, I'm one who believes that it's not happening by accident. Certainly there is a recovery taking place across the country, but it's happening faster and better and hopefully in more sustainable ways in some states rather than others. And I think Florida's made some really tough choices in the last 4 or 5 years that have put us in a position to take advantage of that economic opportunity. And so what I want to talk a little bit about today is what we've done, but also talk a little bit about what we didn't do. And I'm going to try not to go too long because I'd love to have some time for Q&A. One of the things you need to know is that Don Gates has been a great friend. Don Gates is the president of the Senate, and usually, it's like trench warfare between the two chambers, and it's how can we one up the other chamber, and how can we fight to the very last day of session and end it on a bad note and have one chamber who feels like they lost and one who won. And that is historically how the process has worked. What I can tell you with absolute sincerity is that Don Gates was a better friend of mine on day 60 of session than he was on the first day of session. And folks, that never happens. Ask Mike Bennett, a former president pro tem of the Florida Senate. It never happens that way. And the reason it happened that way was because we decided we were going to tackle some real problems. We put together an agenda. And now there were a lot of other things. We knew we were going to pass a budget. There are industry food fights, and the realtors come with their agenda, and the chamber comes with their agenda, and that's stuff that we're going to deal with. But we thought we should pick some issues out that would never happen if we didn't address them. And I've already talked about 3 of them, but I'll talk about a couple others. But let me give you a quote that I heard that really got my attention. It's kind of funny. It says, "Politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it where it exists or not, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedy." Okay? And probably in Washington, D.C., that is a pretty good description of how the process works. But I want you to know, regardless of what the paper says, we had a very successful session. We got a lot of things done. Those 3 I mentioned were: 1, we passed an education reform bill that not only allowed for us to put $1 billion new into education for K-12, $300 million new to our university system with money tied to performance. We also created what is called a preeminent system, which takes our top 2 universities, Florida and Florida State, and allows them to reach for greater heights. We created an online university that's going to be the first of its kind that's state-sponsored, where someone will be able to get a degree from the University of Florida based on competency, not on seat time, which means you don't take a semester course. The minute you master the content, you move on to the next course. You'll be able to get a degree from the University of Florida for $10,000 to $15,000 in the next few years. It's going to change the game for education. We did what we call career and professional education, where we're actually tying funding to getting students prepared in the skill set that actually exists in the workforce. There's a disconnect there that we know about. $120 million. Don Gates was the visionary on this. We did some really, really big things in education. I just want you to know about them. But there were some other things we did. I tend to consider myself to be somewhat libertarian on a lot of issues, but Doug Holder and many others from this part of the state, Nancy Dietert, another one, really worked to champion a bill that I think is hopefully going to save lives in Florida, and that's making it illegal to text while you drive. That's a good thing. You did a good job. It took about 5 or 6 years to get there, and I was one of those people who was holding out till the end, and but when you really look at the data, and I always tell someone, your freedom stops when you start taking away somebody else's. And when you think about the lives that are lost and the children who are out there and the example that we've set, it's a very dangerous thing. And so Doug showed leadership on that. That was his bill, and he worked on it for at least 4 years and maybe 5. That was a big deal. But let me give you some other highlights. It was the best tort reform year the Florida legislature has had in 8 years. We passed 2 great tort reform bills to create a better business-friendly situation here in Florida. We passed an Everglades restoration bill that commits $70 million this year and $30 million every year for the next 30, that we tag team with the federal government to do the biggest, most exhaustive, transformational Everglades restoration that it's ever had. It's going to be a huge, huge deal and hopefully help provide for saving of that resource that we have. We passed a citizens insurance bill, which Jim Boyd has been involved in, called a clearinghouse, so that every policy that comes into the state of Florida that we take on has to get shopped to the private sector first, which helps to reduce our exposure overall. We passed a budget that was not only balanced, but had $3 billion in reserves almost, the highest amount of reserves that we've had since the heyday in 2006. And we also banned what I think were a bunch of internet cafes that I thought the time had come for us to eliminate those as well. So overall, it was a great session. Now, again, people want to talk about what we didn't do. And if you were to judge the session based off what the newspaper said and what the editorial board said, and if there's any editorial boards in here, I'm sorry, don't take it as an offense, or reporters, that's okay. But they would try to tell you that because we didn't expand Medicaid to 1 million people taking federal funds, that was a failure of the session, that somehow that defines the session, and they want to define it that way. And it's not true, and they're wrong. And I want to give you a couple of reasons why we didn't do it, because I think it's important that the business community understands where we're coming from, where the House came from. First thing is, on the very first day of session, I stood up in my speech. I get one time to speak on the floor, and it's on the first day. The rest of the time I have to shut up and preside. But I very clearly said that the Florida House was not going to expand Medicaid, but that we were going to offer an alternative, which we did. Now, what's crazy, and I didn't understand at the time, but it's all come in now, is 2 weeks after I made that statement, I was audited by the IRS. I'm just kidding, I wasn't. But, but hey, it's time. I thought I'd get your attention to make sure you weren't sleeping on me. I'm just kidding. It's not gotten that bad. It's not gotten that bad, yeah. I was not audited, but we certainly got some people's attention when we said that. But what I want you to know is when we said no to expanding Medicaid, it wasn't because we don't want people to have access to care. We know there is a real problem, and it sounds like it's one that's trying to be addressed right here in Manatee County, for access to care. We want people to have insurance. We want everybody to have some form of insurance. That is, it's not a constitutional right, but it's certainly something that when it comes to quality of life that we want people to be able to have. But let me tell you a couple of reasons why we didn't do it. The first is this. In 1990, we had 900,000 people on Medicaid, and we spent $4 billion a year. In 2007, 6 years ago, we had 2 million people on Medicaid, and we were spending $14 billion a year. That's when I had first gotten elected with Doug. Today, we have 3.3 million people on Medicaid, and we're spending $23 billion a year. It is a runaway freight train when it comes to our budget. It is the fastest growing part of our budget. It's making it harder for us to fund our education system. It's making it harder for us to protect the most vulnerable in our state. And we haven't even expanded the populations. That's with the existing population. Imagine expanding it to another 900,000 or 1 million people. So that's one of the reasons we have concerns. The second reason is because how are we going to sustain it? You see, the federal government put it together in a way that, in my opinion, is a bait and switch. They basically say, we're going to pay for it for the first 6 or 8 years, 100% up front, then 90% after that. And then after a while, we'll just figure it out. Well, figuring it out historically means the federal government pays half and we pay half. Our half by 2020 is probably somewhere between $4.5 and $5.5 billion. It takes 2 pennies in the sales tax to pay for that. So we're setting ourselves up by creating a new entitlement for people with the promise of our ability to pay for it with no real way of knowing how we're going to pay for it. Now, the third reason, and this is the one where it gets touchy here, there's probably some providers in this room, is I always ask somebody, now, do you want to expand because you think we'll get better health outcomes, or do you want to expand because you think we should get the money? Is this about money or is this about health outcomes? Because if it's about outcomes, I can prove to you with empirical data, one most recently, a study that came out 2 weeks ago, was in Forbes magazine. Oregon did a long, exhaustive study that shows Medicaid creates no value to the individual in their health. We spend trillions of dollars on a healthcare system that doesn't help people be healthier. I could show you study after study, okay? Now, do they have access to care? Is that a good thing? Yes, it's better than not having access to care. But my point is the way, the system that we're using to deliver healthcare in this country is not working. The access isn't good, the accountability isn't there, and there's a tremendous amount of fraud and waste. So that's another reason. However, when it comes to the money, some people just say, well, look, forget the outcomes, okay? That's debatable. But it's billions and billions of dollars. Why wouldn't we want to take that? Why wouldn't the state of Florida just take the money while they're giving it to us, and when they stop giving it to us, we'll drop people off the rolls? Well, first of all, I think it's irresponsible to bring people in for 2 or 3 years, put them on Medicaid, and then 3 years from now, when it's too expensive for us, say, we can't afford it, you're off. I don't think that's the right thing to do. But more importantly than that, what you're doing is you're creating a bigger entitlement society. And you're saying taking the money that is free is worth creating a more dependent society in your state. And I just want you to know, I don't think that's worth it. And we're not alone. The pundits want to tell you that we're doing some radical thing in the Florida House by not expanding Medicaid. Let me tell you who our friends are. The state of Texas, the state of Arizona, the state of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, Michigan. I mean, this is not just some position that we took. There's 25 to 30 states that have said no or are in the process of saying no. Because what the federal government has said is you take all this money, you give it to all these people and give them Medicaid with no exception, or you get nothing. That's what's been offered to the states. And the more people look at it and the more you start reading the fine print, it is not a good deal for the state of Florida. So here's what we did in our alternative. What Medicaid expansion would have done is given 900,000 people access to care through Medicaid. What we did was we said, if you're over the age of 65, we're going to take care of you. If you're under the age of 21 and you're a kid, we're going to take care of you. If you're disabled or you have a real disability, we're going to take care of you. If you're a parent with children who have dependents, we're going to take care of you. We're going to find a way with state funds to make sure you have access to care. But if you are a childless adult between the ages of 21 and 64, and you're healthy and you can work, the state of Florida does not have a responsibility to pay for your health care. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't. We can't afford it, and it's not going to solve our problem. And here's the other part. Starting January 1st of 2014 this year, you will be able to buy health care through what is called a federal exchange. And the less money you make, the more subsidized that plan will be. So starting January 1st, 2014, if you are at the federal poverty rate, which is 100%, which is like $12,000 a year or above, you will be able to buy a plan, okay, for $25 a month. That will be a Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Aetna, United, Cadillac plan. Now, why would we want to take 400,000 people who could buy a plan for $25,000 a month in the free market and give them that, take that away from them, and force them to go on Medicaid? Why would we do that? That's what Medicaid expansion does, ladies and gentlemen. And no one's talking about it, except for us. And there are people in this room that may disagree with our position on it. But one thing I promised myself and I promised other people was, as we led the Florida House, we were not going to lead out of fear. And we weren't going to lead based on, what people who, whether it's a newspaper or a TV or, an organization, we weren't going to be bullied into doing something we didn't believe was right. And short term, the easiest thing for us to do would be take the money, kick the can down the road, and let the Speaker of the House in 2018 or 2020 figure it out. That'd be the easiest thing to do. We all get to look like heroes. We get to come back to you. You can clap for us. The newspaper will put our, faces on the front page and talk about how great we are. But we will be abdicating our authority to somebody down the road who's going to get stuck with a huge bill that they can't pay and has created health care and a system that doesn't provide better outcomes. That's not right. And leading is not easy. And so the position we've taken as a group is one that is based on principles and on facts and not on ideology. And we believe very strongly in it. And so, I'll just tell you, the politics is a tough game. But economic freedom doesn't just pay for itself. It takes sacrifice, it takes work. And the reason Florida is roaring back is because we have created a pocket of freedom that is one of the most advantageous to do business in America, and maybe even the world. And if we can hold true to that and not build a dependency state, but build an opportunity state, 20 years from now, we will be the shining light of this country. There will be examples in this country of states that went one way, like California and Illinois, who cannot pay their bills. And there will be states like Florida and Texas who go another way. And you will see a stark difference. You will see two Americas. You'll see Americas who use fiscal responsibility and economic freedom as the backbone and the pillar of their economy. And you will see others who use government and social services as the pillar for their economy. I challenge you to pay attention to those states and watch what happens. It will be a very interesting social sciences experiment. And we'll win. We'll win. So I'm honored to be here. The Chamber of Commerce at the state level and at the local level, there's no one closer to the businesses of our state and feel the impacts, both positive and negative. And we appreciate y'all hanging in with us. You have a delegation that is right here before you that are some of the hardest working, most honest, most ethical people I've ever met. And to get a chance to be speaker is a very special and humbling thing. It goes by really fast, and in 12 or 13 months, well, in 12 or 13 minutes, you won't remember who I am, much less 12 or 13 months. But my hope is that the decisions we make are lasting and that they're real. And so with that, I really appreciate your attention, and I will answer any questions that you got. Thank you.
So we'll take questions now, but METV is filming this, so I would ask you, please, if you have a question, please step up to the mic over there, because if not, we won't be able to get it on the film. So we'll open it up to questions.
Any softballs? Jim? What's the agenda for next year? Oh man, come on. Give me a couple of weeks. I think, honestly, for next year it'll be, I think education is the future of our state. And so if we have the most vibrant, innovative minds, I believe human capital brings, financial capital. And the smarter people you have, the more money and the more investment will come to your state. And so a lot of our efforts have been focused on building a better K-12 system. Every data point that exists suggests that Florida is getting better in every level. And I think that's going to continue. So I think you'll see education reform will continue to be big. I think higher education, continuing to invest there and find new ways. The way kids are learning is changing rapidly, and our ability to make education what they call student-centered, where it's not based on the classroom, it's not based on the school, it's based on the student. We have the ability to dial in to how a student learns and helping them in that format. And we've never been able to do that before. And so it's opening up a whole lot of doors that didn't exist, and I think education is a way for Florida to distinguish itself above and beyond other people. So. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Lou Murray. I worked with Governor Engler when he was governor of Michigan on healthcare reform for small business. And I learned a lot, going around the state talking to small business. And the thing I realized is that healthcare is crucial to small business in terms of getting employees, keeping key employees. And the bottom line is that the cost of that service or that product, healthcare is tied into it. It also affects productivity and the satisfaction of the employees. So if you're going to have if you're going to have a state that has that's favorable towards small business and the atmosphere of small business, you have to have a comprehensive healthcare approach for small business. And I just got on the healthcare committee here, and I'm excited about what they're trying to do. The question is, would you be interested in working with us as we put together a comprehensive approach for small business, because it's crucial for the survival of small business?
Yes, I think that's a great point. You bring up a man, Governor Engler, who's one of my heroes. I've had a chance to spend time with him. This is a guy who, halfway through his governorship in Michigan was polling like in the 20s. I mean, just was absolutely in the tank. And everybody, you probably remember it well, and everybody was counting him out. And we're saying, you've got to change what you're doing, change what you're talking about, find new issues, moderate. And he doubled down. He basically said, nope, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to do. Either, the citizens are going to recognize it and stand firm with me, or they won't. And he did. And he got reelected, and it's a great story. He was a great governor. I think you bring up a great point. That the group that gets hit the hardest, it's almost like the innocent bystander to this debate that's taking place is small business, because if you work 30 hours a week, and you make minimum wage in this country, starting January 1st, 2014, you will be able to buy a plan, do the exchange, the federal exchange, for $25 a month. I think that's going to be the answer for small business long term, is that these exchanges that are being created are going to create a marketplace, and depending on your income level will determine the subsidy of how much money you get to help pay for that. But I think you're right. I am committed to working with small businesses. Chairman Corcoran, who's also from Pasco County, is the chairman of healthcare. He's really interested in helping us find a solution that is fitted for Florida. And part of the challenge with, it's hard doing policy as a state, because the difference between Liberty County, who has 6,000 people, and Dade County, who has 3 million people, are vast. So trying to draft policy that meets everybody's needs is hard to do. Imagine the United States of America and trying to draft a healthcare law that addresses Florida's needs and Wyoming's needs. We're just so different. And so I think small business is certainly the key. And you have my commitment and ours that is exactly the type of group of people that we have to be focused on, because we understand it is a challenge. And we're hearing stories every day about how people are just not going to let their employees work more than 28, 29 hours a week because of the new law. And so I think there's going to have to be some changes in Washington to that law. There's some glitches.
My name is Frank Maggio. I work with Insignia Bank in Sarasota, Florida, a community bank in the area, very strong, I'll say that.
Don't come up to Dade City. I'm in the community banking business too, so don't come take all of our business.
Just a couple things. One, just so everybody knows, and so you know, well, first of all, thank you for being here and talking with us. We obviously appreciate that. For the Speaker of the House to come here and to speak with the community is certainly well worth the price of admission. I'm born and raised in the state of Florida. Went to Florida State University. And actually had a chance to meet with, I was not there when your brother Drew was there. It was a little before that. But had the distinct pleasure of being able to speak with President Barron yesterday. And what I want, and this is throwing up softball for you, what I want you to talk about is when I grew up in the state of Florida, when I went to Florida State University, the cost of education was certainly a lot less than it is now. The opportunities in education were certainly not what they are then now, and I don't mean they're better or worse, but certainly when you look at things like the internet, it's just changed the game. Entrepreneurship and the focus on entrepreneurship for a younger demographic as well has changed, and the focus on young professional. Talk to us, explain to us the details of why the preeminence bill, why that changes the game for not just specifically Florida and Florida State, but also education overall, but specifically those universities.
Yeah, it's a matter of resources. You have the problem you have in education, higher education, is it's called, everybody's familiar with the term mission creep, and sometimes what you get is every university wants to have a medical school, every university wants to have a law school, and there's only so many resources that go around, and so you get to a point where you really can't afford to provide all the services at every institution. And so we've got some great institutions. What we have to do is help our institutions find out what they're good at, emphasize those things, give them the resources necessary to make those national models, but everybody can't be the University of Florida. University of Florida has an opportunity through preeminence funding to be a top 10 institution in the next 5 years. We don't have a top 10 institution. We barely have one top 25. It's Florida. They're right at 25. Florida State is in the top 50, but we're trying to get them into the top 25. And the idea of having two universities that are kind of world-class, world-renowned is something that will benefit our state a lot long-term. But I also think that part of the challenge we have in higher education is just the education that we're giving is not necessarily matched up with the skill sets that are needed in the workforce, and they're not matched up with the demand that exists and the jobs that exist. And that's why I'm excited about online learning, because I think it's going to very rapidly marry the two. I think it's going to force us to marry the two. And to me, Florida's never going to be a really exciting, innovative place if we don't have a high-functioning university system. Not like an average. I would call our university system, frankly, sad to say, we're an average system compared to other parts of the country. But we have a chance to be great, and we've just got to make sure that we invest our resources the right way to get there. So, yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for a very invigorating and a very encouraging speech. I really enjoyed it, and I think we've heard two really great presentations this week, and you're one of them. So thank you very much. And both of them have to do with bold leadership, and I think that's what you're giving us. My name is Larry Bussell. I'm the chairman of the Manatee County Commission. And last year, and for a couple of years, I was the chairman of the Port Authority for Port Manatee. And my question is about Port Manatee. I know that the governor knows about Port Manatee. We were fortunate enough to have him come down and talk to us and help us dedicate a new berth. I encourage you to come see what a jewel it is, but truly we need a jump start, and I think the state's in a good position to provide that for us. We'll work with you, and we have a lot of resources, but we need recognition of the value of Port Manatee, the place where it is in vis-a-vis the Panama Canal, and more importantly, the place where it is vis-a-vis Florida, and this huge big market that's around us. So if you can do something to help us, please.
Yeah, no, Commissioner, it's a great point. I I think with what's happening in the Panama Canal, it's creating a lot of opportunity. Florida, because of because of the fact that we're surrounded by water and we have 13 ports, it's a great thing. It means that people can access our state for shipping purposes in all different parts, and that's a good thing. The challenge is, again, it comes down to a division of the resources, and so you've got a couple of ports that do, the majority of the tonnage. You've got big ports like the Port of Miami, and you've got the Everglades, and you've got Tampa, and you've got Jacksonville. That those four really do a lot of the tonnage and the moving in and out. But we've got a lot of targeted ports. Your port is very important to your economy, and I understand that. And I think there's going to be opportunities as bigger and bigger ships come online, particularly with the expansion and the deepening of the Panama Canal. A lot of those are going to go to the bigger ports that exist now. There's just only so much space that exists, and so some of the smaller ships, I think, are going to be looking for new places to go to make room for the bigger ones. And I think the Port of Manatee has a real opportunity, and your proximity to Tampa and the Tampa port is both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. I think it potentially could be a great opportunity for you. I would encourage the Port of Manatee to work very closely with the Port of Tampa and spend time together coordinating and building alliances so that you can do that. So I'm with you. I think it's imperative for our economy, and encourage y'all to continue working down that road with Tampa. I think that's a good opportunity for you. Yes, ma'am.
Robin DeSabatino, just really wanted to thank you and everyone for putting this on today. It's great and encouraging to see young leadership and great energy and everyone being here today. And as Commissioner Bustle just said, the word bold came up several times this week, and we had pancakes and politics, and we really appreciate you taking a bold stance on this, because healthcare is really, really important to most of the citizens here in Manatee that aren't making $50,000, $100,000 a year. It's for the young businessmen and for the entrepreneurs who can't afford to insure themselves, their families, and their workers. And so this step with having $25 at least a month is just amazing, and I really applaud your efforts for doing that. And it'll just really take the burden off other citizens, and then they'll have skin in the game, and they'll have more self-respect. I think that's a good way to put it. With taking the people off the tax roll, off of your rolls between the 21 and 65, how many people does that entail, and how much are you going to save?
It's a lot of people. It's 400,000 people. So the federal plan is 900,000 people, give or take, depending on whose numbers you look at. And they put all of them on Medicaid. Now, there's some ideas that are floating around. Well, what if we take the federal money and we don't put them on Medicaid? But we've seen nothing from Washington that suggests that we can do that. There was a group in Arkansas that tried it, and they have not been able to get there yet. In fact, I've spoke to the Speaker of Arkansas several times, and they're not going to get there. And Secretary Sebelius has flirted with them orally, and she's kind of said, well, maybe we could work something out with the governor, but they will not put anything in writing that says you can put it on anyone on anything other than Medicaid. Our plan is a private sector plan that basically says the state of Florida is going to take responsibility for the parents of children on Medicaid, for children under the age of 21, for the disabled, and some of those targeted what we call vulnerable groups. But we also take a position in the House that if you're between the ages of 21 and 64, and you can work and you're healthy, that the state of Florida should not have a responsibility to pay for your health care. And in fact, we would argue that if you work 30 hours a week and you make minimum wage, you will make enough money to get to that 100%. So you have to hit 100% of the poverty rate or above to qualify for the federal exchange. And that's what it would take to get you there. And if you do that, you can buy a health care plan for $25 a month. And that's the other thing. No one ever appreciates something they don't pay for.
Right.
Even if it's just something, even if it's a copay of $5 or $10 or $25, something, because you value something if you have an investment in it. If it's just given to you, you don't appreciate it. Part of the challenge on higher education, my friend, is that everybody's been complaining that tuition is going up, and it, maybe it's a little bit more than it was. But let me tell you a true statistic that people didn't believe me. They do that fact checking, the political fact, and they thought they had me on this one, but they didn't. This is a true statement. You know what the average family spends on cell phone bills in Florida? $1,200 a year. You know what the average student spends a year on tuition at our university system? $400 a year. The average person is spending 3 times as much money on this than they are on their college education in Florida today at our universities, because of Bright Futures, because of grants, because of everything. You add it all up, the average student, in fact, if you make $60,000 or less, you make money to go to college. You only actually start paying for college in a university system if your family makes more than $80,000 a year. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's great that we help subsidize our education. But when people get on the 5-year and 6-year plan, which I wanted to do, but I wasn't able to do, there's a reason for that. People aren't in a hurry, and we have created a system of entitlement in our education system. People feel entitled to it. It costs us $50,000 to $60,000 a year as a state to fund someone's education. The student thinks it costs $3,000, $4,000 a year. It doesn't. It's way more than that. We're paying for it, and there's a disconnect between what it actually costs and what people pay. And I think that makes people value it less. I really do.
I really appreciate all those. And we did that with my daughter. I said, you're on the 4-year plan.
Right.
And any more than that, you're on your own. And she graduated in the 4 years. So thank you so much for your ideas and your being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Carol Whitmore. I'm a Manatee County Commissioner, and I'm also an RN. I have a question. The $25 that you're saying that the person can get if they qualify to buy insurance, doesn't the employer have to pay for an insurance plan, and then the employee pays the $25? Is that how it goes?
It depends. It depends on if you're over 50 or under 50 employees.
Under 50.
Yeah, what can happen is if you don't offer insurance to your employees, you have to pay a fine.
Right.
That's regardless of anything we do. That's regardless of Medicaid expansion or anything else. If you have a company of a certain size with a certain amount of employees and you don't offer health care to them, you have to pay a fine. And so that doesn't really change whether we endorse Medicaid expansion or not. Some people say that's a reason why we should accept the money, that if our businesses are having to pay the tax, then we should take the money. And again, my concern with that is you're building up an entitlement that now becomes, today's 3.3 million people on Medicaid, now it's 4.3, and maybe 5 years from now it's 5 million people on Medicaid. That's 25% of our population. And the concern I really have, and I'll just open up my whole book here. Today, almost just below 60% of Americans are on a government-run healthcare system, just about. I think it's 56%, something like that. It's between Medicare and Medicaid.
Medicare, right.
If you do Medicaid expansion across the board, and with the amount of people that are moving into Medicare, what could happen is in the next 5 to 10 or 15 years, you could find yourself where 75% of the population is on a government-run healthcare system. So the question's going to come in 5 or 10 years when somebody else is president of the United States or Congress. They're going to say, why don't we just go to a single-payer system? 3/4 of us are already on a government-run healthcare system. Why don't we just, do it? Now, if you think things are working in Western Europe and that Greece and Spain and France have it figured out, then sure, that's an option. But to me, there's been no data that suggests going to a single-payer system is going to be better. And I'm not advocating that the status quo is great, but in my opinion, the reason they're pushing so hard for Medicaid expansion is because they want 75% of the population on a government-run system, because what they ultimately want is a single-payer system. And I'm not disparaging someone who wants that. There may be people here that want that. I think that's the wrong direction. But that's why Washington has been so inflexible with the Medicaid expansion. They don't want us to do innovative free market plans because they want people on Medicaid and Medicare.
And
that's my opinion, by the way, too. That's just what I think.
The House's plan didn't get approved by the Senate, though, right? And they
Correct.
had another plan. So your plan, it sounds fine, but it didn't get passed by the Senate. They had another one. So how are you going to assure that this is going to happen next year?
I don't know. I mean, I think we've got some educating to do. I mean, honestly, that's why I'm here. My job is, along with the other representatives, is to talk to you about what we're offering as solutions and get feedback from you. And we don't have the corner on the market on ideas or solutions either. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of representatives reaching out. But anything that sounds really good and sounds almost too good to be true, like why wouldn't you just take the $51 billion that's free, usually is too good to be true. And that's what's happening right here. And I would urge y'all, when you read that or you hear that, to challenge where it's coming from a little bit, because it's not as cut and dry as people would want you to think. Senator.
Speaker, one of the things that I had tried to do many, many years ago, which got me involved in politics, was looking again at the delivery system and the cost of it to the small employer. And the thing that drove me, and it would take someone like yourself and President Gates, both of them being willing to create and kick over an anthill now and then, I've always said, why do I as an employer pay more to have my employee covered 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, than I do to buy him a major health plan that covers him 365 days, 24 hours a day. Why can't I pay one premium? In 1991, we actually passed legislation that there would be 5 test cases to try it. If you remember, shortly after that, some people went to jail from Risk Corp down here because of contributions, and it was never enacted. I would love to see the legislative process again look at the delivery system. Do I, as an employer, if I'm willing to pay for my employee to be covered, he doesn't come in and have to lie to me on Monday why he got it hurt, okay? There's no question about it, but I pay one premium and one premium only, and I would like to see you all go down that territory.
I think that's a great solution that we should talk a lot about, Senator. Thank you for that, and thanks for your service to the state of Florida. It's a great idea. Well, it sounds like I've exhausted all the questions that are out there. I know y'all want to go, and I apologize for taking a little bit long on my comments. Again, let me just say thank you very much for honoring me to have a chance to come and chat with you. I promise you, we may not always do what you like, or every issue that we take up may not be in agreement with what you believe, but I hope you know that our goal for the state of Florida is the same as yours. You know, we want this to be the place where business thrives, where our families thrive. I've got 3 little kids. I think all of us have little kids or grown kids now, and we want them to have opportunities. And we can only do that if they're willing to make the tough decisions. And I think you've got a legislature. I know you've got a House that is willing to do that. So thank you all very much. Thanks, Tom.
Great presentation. Thank you to Speaker Weatherford. And thank you to all of our state legislators and all of our elected officials for the time and the service that they give to us. And we just got a great community going on, a great future for Florida. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you soon.